But that's my big question is Philly going to be able to exploit Washington like they did in the first outing? And if they don't, then yeah, I think it could be a relatively close game.
Has arrived. I apologize. He's been waiting patiently in the virtual green room. So let's pop up Matthew Parrish from the Washington Times chiming in with some Commanders Week. Matthew, it's been a while. Good morning. How are you?
Hey, nice to see you again. Sorry.
Yeah, you did such a great job, man. We said, hey, we got to pop you back on, get the finger on the pulse. Commanders have had a lot of moving and shaking since the last time we saw you. Let's start off the field, I guess, with the big story. Daniel Snyder. It's been reported that he's going to sell the team. Is this true?
Yeah, they're exploring potential transactions. Now, whether that means to get new minority partners, to have a minority stake in the franchise for someone to buy in, or whether it's to sell the whole thing, is still up in the air. But from what it sounds like he's going to sell the entire thing. I think they're kind of too far down the road at this point with all the active investigations in place, the pressure on Snyder to sell from his fellow owners. I'd be really surprised at this point if it was for just a minority stake. I think it's for the entire thing, and based on other reporting from Fox and the NFL Network, that this could be done as soon as March, which would be surprising. So, these things kind of go fast once they get started, and it seems like that's going to be the case here.
Yeah, and in the upwards of $7 billion. Yeah. We saw the Broncos go for like $4.5 billion. Washington could fetch as much as $7.5 billion. Man, it's a crazy world we're living in 2022, Matthew. But I heard Jeff Bezos, Jay-Z, Matthew McConaughey, Kevin Durant. It sounds like there's a lot of suitors lining up for the rights to drop $7 billion.
Right. Well, it's funny. Those guys could all be part of one group. And that's not to mention all the other groups, because, Jay-Z and Matthew McConaughey, Kevin Durant, they don't have the money by themselves, I think, to be able to buy a team outright. Jeff Bezos does, but I think they're trying to latch onto him. There are other people involved too. Byron Allen, who was involved in the Broncos bidding. Matt Ishba, he's a mortgage guy from Michigan State. He's involved. Maybe Josh Harris of the 76ers, he's been rumored. Really? So, they do have a lot of the people who bid on Broncos will be interested in the Commanders. These teams only come up for sale once in a blue moon. There have only been 3 teams that have been sold since 2014. And even though Washington has kind of fallen to the bottom of the league in attendance and their situation seems relatively dire, I had someone explain it to me that this is still a jewel franchise in the NFL. Forbes ranks them as the 6th highest valued team in the league. And, I think we'll see a lot of bidding because of that. People recognize the value.
Yeah, people forget the Washington won a lot of Super Bowls. Joe Gibbs, what was it, 3 or 4 different starting quarterbacks he won a Super Bowl with? There's a lot of storied history there with that organization. Now, on the field, since the last time we talked to, they got a new starting quarterback. Looks like they got a new starting running back. Brian Robinson is in a timeshare with Antonio Gibson. It looked like he got the start against the Vikings. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Matthew, but tell me what you've seen from Heineke and B-Rob, and how much different is it from Wentz and Gibson?
Yeah, Heineke, it's been interesting. He's actually kind of lifted this offense a little bit. They're averaging about 2 more points per game, a couple more yards per game. They're just stylistically different quarterbacks. Heineke's mobility, I think, is an advantage to Washington, but he doesn't have nearly the same amount of arm strength that Wentz does. He and Wentz kind of share the similarities in that they have a lot of throws that are like, why did you make that? What were you thinking there? They don't have necessarily the best decision making. And I think with Heineke, they know who he is. That's an advantage in the sense that if Wentz gets hurt, Heineke can come in and kind of pick up where things left off. But it also hurts them because he doesn't have the highest ceiling in the world. Teams kind of know his weaknesses and know how to kind of exploit that. And so what you've seen over these last 4 games with Heineke now is that it's really kind of been a mixed bag. The highs have been really high, the lows have been low, and they were in position to win that Vikings game. He had an unfortunate interception in the fourth quarter, kind of the things that you see. He ignored his first read and tried to force a throw into the second one and sailed it way too high, and it was an interception. So, once Wentz is healthy, if this team isn't rolling with Heineke, I think they go back to Wentz, but we kind of have to see on that. Oh, and then Brian Robinson. Sorry.
Well, no,
yeah,
let me follow up. We'll get to B-Rob because what you said makes a lot of sense. But Heineke, I feel like no, you're right. He's not the long-term solution. Mm-hmm. And when they signed Carson Wentz, I said they just signed a more expensive Tyler Heineke. Yeah. But tell me if I'm wrong, though. I noticed this even last year and this year. It seems like the players gravitate towards this guy. Like there's almost a rally of the troops, and they just there's a different kind of energy and vibe. Just as an outside perspective, am I wrong?
No, absolutely correct. I mean, he's a guy who's really well liked in that locker room. He doesn't talk like your typical quarterback. I mean, somewhat, but he's like very kind of honest with the media, and he has that kind of everyday vibe that really attracts to his teammates. And you just have to look at his story. Undrafted, was playing in the XFL, spent time on his sister's couch before coming back into the NFL again. And so, I think people are really endeared to him, and he plays with that sort of mentality too. The way he leaves it all out there. Just look at the pass he threw to Curtis Samuel this past Sunday. It was just a triple coverage. Honestly, a terrible throw, but it was still a touchdown in part because the Viking safety tripped over the ref or collided with the ref. Curtis Samuel caught it, but it just those moments are so kind of fun and rare in the NFL that they go a long way in helping Heineke kind of keep that level of wow, who is this guy, and feeds to that energy.
Yeah, definitely somebody you want to root for just as a football fan. Like, you just love these kind of stories. Now, Brian Robinson has a different kind of story, but another guy you like to root for. I mean, he was the victim of an unfortunate gunpoint incident where he got shot twice at face value, which is unbelievable to think. Here he is now starting and having a significant role for the Washington football team. Now, the results it's kind of been a mixed bag. Again, from an outside perspective, you tell us, but from what I see on paper, it's 3.3 per carry. Gibson's 3.7 per carry. It looks like Curtis Samuel, funny enough, has been their most effective runner in terms of yards per attempt. But how much different or diverse is this offense with the Brian Robinson? Does that make Gibson and Curtis Samuel more interchangeable, or how have they kind of been utilizing these guys?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, if you think about you hear this kind of cliche almost of your running back tandem being a 1-2 punch, but Brian Robinson is very much the jab, the kind of we're going to plow him along, pick up 3 yards, pick up 4 yards, pick up 3 yards. And then Gibson comes in and bam, it normally, I know he's averaging only 3.7 yards per carry, but he's had some explosive runs. They really involved Antonio Gibson in the pass game. And I think they've really kind of found a ways to kind of play off each other. And, you look at that 3-game winning streak, Washington was running the ball really well, even if the yards per carry weren't great. They were able to control the clock. They were able to move the ball. The running game, I think, had a lot to do with that. And so, Brian Robinson was a type of running back that they needed. They didn't really have anyone who could excel in short yardage situations. They didn't really have a bruising type of back like that because Antonio was big for his position. He's still 6 feet, 6'1", somewhere in there, but he's not the kind of guy that's going to bully you the more carries he gets. He's more of an elusive type runner, but I think they really play well off each other. And yeah, you mentioned Curtis Samuel. They've been able to really find creative ways to get him the ball, whether it's from the backfield or using his speed. He's really kind of a valuable playmaker, which is nice to see because he was mostly hurt last year.
Yeah, he was mostly hurt last year, but we saw early on in his career coming out of Ohio State at Carolina. He's kind of the guy that paved the way for the Deebo Samuels and the Devin Duvernays of the world, that all these wide receivers now that line up in the backfield. Curtis Samuel has been doing it for quite a long time. We're talking to Matthew Paris. Washington Times does a great job here on the Football Playbook making his cameo. Let me ask you this, because we all know the Commanders are going to go as far as this defense takes them. And that defensive line is a good one. And they've got that interior pass rush of Payne and Allen in the middle, up the middle. Montez Sweat, not too shabby. Oh, by the way, Smith Williams is in the mix. They got the international guy with the handful of sacks. Now, you tell us, because in Philadelphia, we're hearing Chase Young could be active for this matchup. How realistic is that? What are you hearing down there in DC?
Yeah, I think it is realistic. I mean, he returned to practice last week. They started his 21-day clock, even though he's still on the physically unable to perform list. Now, they are being really careful with him. There was a report that he was expected to return to practice a week earlier than he ended up returning. So they kind of held him out another week out of precaution. He suffered a serious knee injury. I mean, it wasn't just it was a torn ACL, but they had to do a full knee reconstruction rather than just how you normally repair an ACL. So the rehab process was a little bit more complicated, a little bit lengthier than your traditional ACL tear. And so because of that, they've had to really work him back into now. I think he's past the physical standpoint, so they just have to work him back into football shape. And whether that's right for this week or next, I'm not really sure. But at the same time, it is a Monday night game that gives him an extra day to kind of get another practice in. And Chase Young kind of just has a flair for the dramatics, right? I mean, coming back on a Monday night primetime game is very much his MO. And so, I wouldn't be surprised to see him out there, even if it's just on like a limited snap basis. But, if he gets back to the type of rusher he was in 2020, coming in with this group, I mean, that's some scary stuff for opposing offenses.
Yeah, I mean, if he's active, I really think he could be an X factor on Monday night, even in a limited role, 15, 20 snaps. He's got to be accounted for. I mentioned he kind of early on in his career, he's reminding me, fortunately or unfortunately, of Jadeveon Clowney. Like when he's on the field, he's electrifying, but when he's on the field, there's always a big if. So we're talking to Matthew Paris, Washington Times. Cole Holcomb, I heard it was a little bit banged up at the linebacker spot. What's his status, and is there any other injuries pending here that could have an impact on this Monday Night Football affair?
Yeah, so he's missed the last 2 games with a foot injury. Jamin Davis has played really well in his absence. This was a guy that was struggling early in the year, seemed to kind of turn a corner lately. But Washington is super thin at linebacker. Even Holcomb's backup, David Mayo, missed last week, and they went to John Bostic, their former star. Besides those guys, besides how they are at linebacker, I think the big question is Jahan Dotson. He's missed the last 5 games now with a hamstring injury. Was working out before Sunday's game on the speed ladder. Looked like the speed had returned quite a bit, but we'll have to see if he actually practices this week. He was having a really nice first quarter of the season before he got hurt. He was a huge red zone target for them and had this nice chemistry with Carson Wentz, and I think he could really help out Taylor Heineke as well. So, we'll have to see how he's doing, but would be an important piece for their offense if they're able to get him back.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about him as a potential early on Rookie of the Year candidate, odds on in the beginning of the season. So does that mean Diami Brown, is he the next man up? I saw him he had a game with Wentz where he had 2 like big play touchdowns, and then I haven't heard or seen anything from him since then. Is he the guy that fits that role, or who's the next?
Yeah, I mean, he had the Titans game, but honestly, everyone was kind of really surprised that he had that type of game in him because his rookie season was not like that. I mean, he is the speed threat that you would want in offense, but He's doesn't have necessarily the best hands. He's kind of inconsistent that way. The guy that they have been playing more over him is Cam Sims. Now, Diami Brown, after the Titans game, he hurt his groin in Chicago and missed a game or two with that as well. And so he came back and played Sunday, this game against the Vikings, but he had a much quieter outing. It was still more Cam Sim, I think, registered more snaps over him. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a clear difference, though, when Dotson is in there versus Cam Sims or De'Ami Brown. You'd much rather have um, Dotson in there. But, they've been finding ways to have offense with Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel.
Cam Sims, man, what a blast from the past. I remember him coming out. He was with the Bears. He kind of had some injury woes, and haven't heard that name for a while. So appreciate the update there. Matthew Paris, that's why we bring him on the Football Playbook, man. We're just learning all kinds of knowledge now. I told you, I saw that Vikings game. Washington should have won. They were winning the entire game. I give Ron Rivera a lot of credit for having this team, man. 4-5, still in the hunt. How do you see this game? Because I think 11 points seems like a lot to lay against the Commanders team who just played a 7-1 Vikings team pretty tough. How do you see this game? What's the outcome? Is it a close affair? Is the Commanders staying a shot here? How do you see it, Matt?
Well, I think this will be a really interesting test for Washington's defense because you think about the first outing, when Washington's defense actually kind of started to turn around this season. I think it kind of started in that Eagles game in a way. They had that 24-point quarter, but after that, they shut out Philly the rest of the way. And ever since then, they've been really good at limiting kind of explosive plays, much more so than what Philly was able to do. And so that's my big question is Philly going to be able to exploit Washington like they did in the first outing? And if they don't, then I think it could be a relatively close game. I still really like the Eagles. I mean, I think the best team in the NFL right now. They're playing still relatively well, even though the Houston game was close. And so, I like Philly to win, but I think it'll be more competitive than the first outing was.
No, I tend to agree with you, Matt, and really appreciate the insight and analysis. Grade A stuff. Tell the listening audience at home where they can find all your great content, what you have on deck.
Yeah, thanks. You can find me on the Washington Times, WashingtonTimes.com/sports. You can follow me on Twitter. Well, that's still a thing, at Matthew_Paris, Paras. And I'm doing a lot on the, looking at the ownership sale of how fast sports teams are sold. I just had an article about that. Taking a look at some other things related to that later in this week that I'll just tease for now. And it's been fun. You can write a lot more about than just football on this beat. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, Snyder's a big story that we'll definitely be keeping tabs on there at the Washington Times. Appreciate your time here on the Football Playbook, and do yourself a favor while you're in Philly, Matt. Get yourself a cheesesteak, would you?
No, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, there you have it. Matthew Paris. Make sure you go follow him, one of the best in the business.